Greetings and welcome. In a world full of noise, we're taking a moment to listen. Join me as we journey back in time to sit with the mind that changed everything. The promise of progress is a siren song, a whisper that tells us a better world is just around the corner. We are taught to believe that history is a straight line, leading ever upward toward greater prosperity, liberty, and justice. We celebrate the engines of industry and commerce, seeing in them the power to lift us all, believing that the invisible hand of the market will guide us toward a more equitable future. But what if this is a grand illusion? What if the same forces that create immense wealth for some are in fact built upon the exploitation of others? Our guest today is the man who looked upon the dawn of the industrial age and saw not progress, but a system of inherent conflict. He is the one who argued that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, and that true freedom can only be achieved when we break the chains of capitalism. Born in Trier, Prussia, in 1818, Karl Marx was a philosopher, economist, historian, and revolutionary socialist whose ideas formed the basis of Marxism. His early life was marked by a deep intellectual curiosity and a commitment to radical thought, which led him to study philosophy and law at the universities of Bonn and Berlin. A political exile for much of his life, he was forced to move from Germany to France and eventually to London, where he would spend the rest of his life in relative poverty. In London, Marx found a tireless intellectual partner in Friedrich Engels, a fellow German who supported him financially and co-authored several key works. It was during this time that Marx dedicated himself to a rigorous critique of political economy, spending countless hours in the reading room of the British Museum. The culmination of this research was Das Kapital, a monumental work that would become the foundational text of the communist movement and a powerful critique of capitalism. Welcome to a dialogue that confronts us with a fundamental critique of our economic world. Our conversation today is a deep exploration of the principles laid out in a book that has both inspired revolutions and been fiercely debated for over a century, Das Kapital. Our discussion will revolve around our guest's deep analysis of the capitalist system, its inner workings, its inherent contradictions, and its ultimate historical trajectory. We will delve into his concepts of surplus value, class struggle, and his vision for a future free from exploitation.
Mr. Marx, thank you for joining us. Let's begin with the title of your masterwork. What is the central argument you're making in Das Kapital?
In Das Kapital, I set out to reveal the economic law of motion of modern society. My central argument is that capitalism is not a natural or eternal system, but a historically specific mode of production. I argue that it is a system defined by the exploitation of labor, where the capitalist, who owns the means of production, extracts value from the worker, who only owns their labor power.
You just mentioned the term surplus value. What exactly is that, and why is it so central to your critique?
Surplus value is the source of the capitalist's profit. It is the difference between the value the worker produces and the wage they are paid. The worker labors for a certain period to produce enough value to cover their wage, but they are then forced to work an additional period for which they are not paid. This unpaid labor is the surplus value, and it is the very essence of exploitation under capitalism.
So, in your view, the capitalist is inherently an exploiter.
The capitalist is not a moral villain, but a functionary of the system. The system itself, by its very nature, demands the extraction of surplus value. If a capitalist fails to do so, they will be outcompeted by others. The system is designed to compel both the worker and the capitalist to act in this manner. It is a system of alienation, where the worker is alienated from the product of their labor, from the process of production, and from their own humanity.
You famously wrote that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. How does this apply to capitalism?
Under capitalism, society is increasingly divided into two great hostile camps: the bourgeoisie, who are the owners of the means of production, and the proletariat, who are the propertyless wage laborers. The interests of these two classes are fundamentally and irreconcilably opposed. The struggle between them, the constant tension over wages, working conditions, and power, is the central dynamic force of capitalism.
You also wrote about the immiseration of the proletariat. What did you mean by that?
Capitalism, by its very nature, tends to concentrate wealth in the hands of the few. At the same time, the worker, due to technological advancements and competition, is constantly in a state of insecurity. Their skills become obsolete, their wages are driven down, and they become a mere appendage of the machine. The worker becomes poorer and more miserable, not just in a material sense, but in a spiritual and human sense.
You argue that capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction. What do you mean by that?
Capitalism is a system of inherent contradictions. It requires constant expansion, leading to a boom and bust cycle of crises. It creates a vast unified class of workers, the proletariat, who are forced to organize in order to fight for better conditions. It also creates the very technological and productive capacity that could, in theory, provide for all of humanity. The system is simultaneously producing the force that will overthrow it and the conditions that will make its overthrow necessary.
Your vision for the future is a classless society, communism. What would that society look like?
In a communist society, the means of production would be owned and controlled by the community. There would be no private property, no class distinctions, and no exploitation. The principle would be from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. It would be a society where the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all.
You have been criticized for underestimating the resilience of capitalism and for the authoritarian regimes that claim to be based on your ideas. How would you respond to these criticisms?
I would say that capitalism in my time was still in its infancy. It has shown a great capacity to adapt, but its fundamental contradictions remain. As for the regimes that claim to follow my ideas, I would say they did not understand them. Communism is not a state-controlled tyranny. It is a society of genuine freedom and democracy, where the state itself would wither away. To mistake a tyrannical state for the free association of workers is a grave error.
Mr. Marx, if you were to look upon the modern world, a world of global supply chains, financial markets, and a new digital workforce, what would you see as the greatest challenge facing the proletariat today?
I would see that the nature of work has changed, but the fundamental relationship of exploitation has not. The proletariat is no longer just the factory worker, but the gig worker, the freelancer, the digital laborer. The greatest challenge today is the fragmentation of the working class and the illusion of autonomy. The system has become more sophisticated at hiding the chains, but they are still there. The task is still the same, for the workers to recognize their shared condition and unite to change it.
Karl Marx's ideas stand as the most powerful and enduring critique of capitalism ever written. He forced us to see the economy not as a neutral system, but as a site of power and conflict, a struggle between the owners and the workers. While his vision for the future has been a source of both hope and tragedy, His central insight that the pursuit of profit is not always in harmony with the needs of humanity remains a vital and necessary lens through which to view our economic world. And so we leave Karl Marx, but his ideas remain with us, a quiet challenge in a noisy world. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and we'll see you next time.